On the higher level, they must be laughing when a cat like me comes in ready to solve the problems. Because they like, yo, he's about to get scarred up in there. He has no clue. Just like a shaman, you know, when as a real shaman, you know somebody's going to purge on you. You know, so this new dainty shaman that's like, yo, okay, I'm all about it. And then, you know, the exorcist starts coming out. You know, that, you know, now, you know, we're going to get that mouth, as they say. And so in this, because nobody again told me to be a leader, it was something that I chose to do. I know I had to stand in it. And so we started discovering things a long time ago that really, really assisted, that had a lot of incredible accuracy to them about us. Remember, this is called the sanctuary, this part of the platform, before we get into his story, her story. And in this sanctuary, there's many things about you. And even from the astronomical level, as we can see the position, we can see that we're in Sagittarius. We're one day, so we're still in autumnal season. We'll be moving forward tomorrow in winter solstice, which is in one day. On the Deccan, which is the Egyptian system, we're in the third Deccan. On the Nakshatra, we're in the Uttara Ashada, which is ruled by the sun. We have 4 planets in retrograde right now, and we have a next eclipse on February the 16th of 2026 in 59 days, right? So that's the HUD of what I want to see as I'm getting up in the morning, like, okay, what crystals should I be wearing? Which, when this system is done, it will be known as, I just call it the cloud, where you have real-time spiritual knowledge that is working with your natal chart to understand how you're positioned for this day, to how much you can maximize, not the bad things that are going to happen, because you create what you want to happen, but how much you can maximize, or what energies you really need to be funning with, because that's how the energy is moving. In a farm, you don't plant during certain times certain things. That's what we're talking about. So this is the personal side of the HUD. We have the Oracle here. Let's see if the Oracle wants to talk today. I'm looking to do something great. What do you got for me? Oh, what this is as you can see, it's not just that it's real-time chat, but it's talking about what we know as enealogy. It knows what your archetype is. And so it talks from that perspective. By the way, this is the world's first agentic platform, not the world's first spiritual agentic platform. It's the world's first agentic platform. Last time I was on the mic, I promised it, and I said it'd be about 2 or 3 weeks. I was about 1 month. But still, to have a system that is thinking on its own based on the information that it's given, which is why it doesn't talk to the internet. It doesn't talk to all of the falsehood and the false narratives. It has its own knowledge of what is going on. And that knowledge is what we're going to pull from today. Because a long time ago, me and a great friend of mine were talking about how there were so many spiritual events that we know to have taken place, that the only way that we could ever hope to somehow get some consistency and even see the story, let alone if we want to give the story to our children, would be to somehow get all of the events together and then get them all chronologically sorted. And as you can see, such a big request. You know, that's a huge request for somebody to ask. That's like the wish list of existence. Like, yo, can you put all the esoteric events together for me and like date them so that I can see exactly when things happen? And can you, since Jeannie, since we're here, can you make images for them? I mean, Jeannie, I want stuff that really looks like what exactly happened. It all has to be accurate too. I need it to be like across all the languages, right? And then of course all the cultures, because everybody doesn't necessarily believe the same thing, or maybe they do. Maybe when we get this whole thing together, we'll figure out that everybody was kind of believing in the same thing. And then somebody just, start talking about a different level of truth. And, but these are all like wish lists of occultism. Nobody is really going to spend that much time. They're going to sit around and talk as much as they can about these reptiles and never even really consider the amphibians and all the rest of the bull-headed men, snake-headed men, lion-headed men and women, etc., from all the ancient cultures and all that, because after all, isn't it just about the subscribers and just about the clicks, right? when really, from my perspective, there's a great mission. And I'm wondering, what is this, like one of those matrices maybe where I'm the only one that's real? I won't say that because, of course, I would assume that wifey is real and the kids is real. But at the end of the day, as I'm saying that, being charged with a great mission and then saying, yeah, I'm going to complete that mission, it's quite interesting when you bite off a big chunk of the esoteric knowledge and the esoteric wisdom. And as you can see, what I was just scrolling through is that the entire story, starting from the primordial and then moving from there into 10,000 to 3,000 BCE, and then moving up through this and then identifying who and what is moving perfectly. Remember, these engines are they're at a level where they can visualize 15 different concepts in an image at the same time and create cohesion and then draw from all of the linguistic systems to bring in the proper symbolism, languages, and even motifs and regalias and borders even. You see what I mean? But who is using it for that is what I'm saying, because it does take that intention. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today is getting the intentions in alignment, because one of the things that I was really concerned about as being, I guess the elder at this stage is that if somehow the knowledge is lost, if somehow the wisdom that was already etched on the walls in different places and all that is made obscure, then now we really get to start all over again and get lost as far as us that's coming in the future, things that are carrying our DNA. So it's important to preserve the knowledge and the wisdom, and then of course go one further and really upgrade it. And that's what I always was saying in the beginning. I was like, it seems like we're upgrading everything. They got new cars and planes and flying robots and all this, but they're not upgrading spirituality. They're still dealing with the legacy system with Al-Alim or Allah, and they mad about that. And then they got this other system over here with this dude that definitely couldn't be the real dude from that area. And then if you say anything about this, of course, you know what you got coming, right? Because it's millions of beings. However, if billions of beings are doing the wrong thing and going in the wrong way, and you are clear that that is what's happening, it doesn't even matter. It is best for you to move in the other direction. And then when they finally turn around, you'll be ahead. And then you can assist them with leaping back to where they need to be, not leave them, not laugh at them, not tell them I told you so. See, I told y'all. I told y'all what they was really doing and what they was really connected to. We spent years and years upon years just dealing with the vibration of the conspiracy to bring forth awareness. When you're even talking about all that crazy things and, those kind of stuff that's going on, that even draws a certain level of virtue from you, right? It's just a simple difference between having something very amazing on your mind versus having something that's a bit uncomfortable on your mind. How it changes your frequency and how you feel. So many truth sayers and way showers were actually subject to quite a bit of murk, just because people even like to hear the murk first. They want black goo before they want pranayama and deep meditations and heavy level cold plunges and breaths of fire. You see what I mean? So in all of this, it was quite interesting, to say the least, to understand how the spiritual power was moving, how to move with it, how to teach others about it, how to do that safely, how to stay preserved in the whole thing. You can see why, it's easy to crash out, so many of the other people that we knew through this whole segment, even some of my own peers that you don't see or hear from anymore. And it's also easy to be out there like Top G, having to fight in a couple nights because they got you on the gladiator, cut your face with the kitchen knife style form of consciousness, right? Where even the influencer now needs to go and jump in the ring and fight, right? But this is all the stuff that we were seeing on movies and seeing on things that, hey, this is going to happen. Like this, hey, this is predictive programming. No, this is patterns. And so it's important for us to know the master pattern. So today, we're going to open up this area. And this area here is called the era summary. Okay? Because It just so happens that not everybody has all day to read what would be about 2,000 separate events just within the saga, about 2,000, 2,300 separate events that occurred. Each of them at least almost a page to 2 pages worth of hard data about, hey, this is who we're talking about. So since we're already using Sybil OS, Sybil looks at all of the information and says, okay, I'm going to put it together as a story, and then I'm going to give it to you in a summary, and the summary is going to be for that epoch. Okay? Because also throughout this whole process, there was a lot of time, a lot of energy, things that will never be able to be extracted again in this mission and in this effort. And we're growing this. Like, just like you see these long format explanations, this can easily be in every single language that is worth to translate it in. The entire site, we're moving fast. Like, this is already a story that we're putting inside of the timeline and visualizing. So I'm going to read the story to you because I want to break down a few things so that way you get completely why the world is dealing with what they are dealing with right now. Okay? I'm going to start the reading. Before memory was etched in stone, before the first king was crowned, before the sun itself was named, there was a resonance. This was the primordial era, a chapter written not in ink, but in the starlight and subtle energies that shaped a young world. The cosmos was not a silent void, but a theater of immense forces, a garden where civilizations were seated and cosmic philosophies clashed. Now, right away, we should know that in something that doesn't have an end and doesn't have a beginning, whether that boggles your mind or not, it still means that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of different kind of beings and different kind of memories and all of that. But what we do have more than anything is what? Space. It's the same thing that they're trying to point to you out there. Like, look, there's a lot of space out there. You may believe that, you may not. You can look at the fourth dimension, right? And they say, hey, you know, there's a lot of space on there. You could believe that or you could believe not. In the dream world, it seems like there's quite a bit of space there, but you may believe it or not believe it. But on the most shortest, smallest fractal, let's say that you're aware of here, which is Earth, you could go to places, even like Texas, and there's just miles and miles of nothing. You could go to other countries, mountain ranges, etc. It's just silent. There is nobody there. So one thing that goes on in these spaces is that there's a lot of space for development. But you should know that if you see certain things developing, that means other things are developing, meaning that a one who works in nature or funds in nature, as I say, when they see certain things growing, they know other things are going to be growing too. So this is how, for advanced beings especially, you can really know what's going to come next in a specific sector. So it says, in this grand experiment, Earth was a prize, a living library of genetic potential. And I want to hold there for a moment because you are the Earth. You are the prize. And despite how the Earth may make you, or not the Earth, but the consensus, the structure, the systems that are in play, they may make a person feel like they don't have any value. They base the value on the credit score, how much money you have, right? So in all these things, it's to decrease the value of a person because, of course, it's all about, in certain tenses, how cheap are you? If you don't think you have a lot of value, then it's easy for beings that are trying to get you for cheap, trying to get your energy for cheap, that they could just not spend anything to have your energy. So it's important that we connect that. Anytime you get, and I explained it like this, I explained how we trade all the time. It's just something that's natural. Even from the first tribes, you're trading things that maybe even your daughter made with something that some guy has grown, or you're trading things that one of the sisters have made for something that one of the uncles needs. You see, so there's a lot of trading going on, and what's always going on in trading is what has the most value. And what has the most value is generally what is the rarest. This is why I was even saying that you have a lot of rare beings on earth because some of the souls here are so rare. They're just in the cloak. They're in the human suit, but they're so rare and their value is so high because there's only 1 or 2 or 3 of them here. Versus then you got other things where it's very numerous, so the value is lower. So all I'm saying is that just as we go at trade, which is a pattern, you could imagine there are things that they see you and humans and even children and all that as so valuable, they have dedicated their existence to pursuing it and making it theirs. So just because you may not be as concerned or feel as much self-worth or any of that, it doesn't mean that they aren't like that. See what I mean? And that's what's important about Earth is because when you start seeing all this stuff go on, you see the children, you see the jewelry, you see all of this stuff. This is a big plan happening here. You can start thinking about how valuable something like this really is. Like if you wanted to put a price tag on it, they already got a few $100-200 million houses sitting over on just one little small area. What do you think the value to Earth really is? And how much do you think that something else may be so aggressive at making it theirs? And so if we be like, nah, don't worry, I'm not worried about my sovereignty. How much do you think there would be some beings that would be aggressive about taking your sovereignty? You see what I mean? Seeing the value of it. And so that's something that I wanted to just, maybe overemphasize, but be very clear about just how much value there is inside of you. And then of course in Earth, because this is the micro macro. So it says the 9 cosmic overseers of immense antiquity had designed 12 original planets to seed life here, among them the home world of the Hoovids, tasked with implanting the fierce spark of individuality. And I pause there again, because while you may not remember the Hoovids, because they're now lost to the memories, there are many places that have been lost to the memories. What we're focusing on is the fierce spark of individuality. Because is that not what it all gets cranked up for in the first place? Isn't it the very individuality or uniqueness that a person has that makes them different than something else and then identifies them as something basically individual? That's when you begin the process of still being connected to everything. You're breathing the air. Our souls and spirits are connected. All of this stuff is connected. But right now you feel like it's just you and about what's going on with you. So those are those paradoxical things about the reality. You could be totally individual, but be connected to everything. But that needs the fierce spark of individuality. And it is fierce because to be able to keep your individuality, you often have to protect yourself with the professional technologies. It goes on, it says, Lord Al-Im, a master of Genesis sciences, was charged by the Asa-Uru, which is also known as the Asa-Uru Empire, with the celestial architecture of a solar system, meticulously cultivating life on planets now lost to memory. On Earth itself, a state of grace prevailed. This was the eternal day, an age of innocence where humanity, the Igbo or first people, lived in communion with divinity under a sky that never knew night. You've heard of this. You've heard of that the planet, it didn't have a nighttime. Some even say that it was luminous, that it didn't even have a sun. And this also reflects, because you'll notice in these builds, it reflects the state of the people, the condition of the space. Also remember, all this knowledge is not just like, hey, we're going to tell one little story. It's coming from thousands of things that have been estranged through a filter. It goes on, these were the Grimaldi, which is the beginning of the text today where I said the dwarves. They are the Grimaldi. I'll open this here in another tab. The planet's original humans, also known as the seed people, who sprang not from genetic manipulation, but from the planet's own superior evolutionary design. Know this. The planet itself is capable of bringing forth life. Duh. And this is why that's to me the missing link, because some don't realize when the planet brought forth certain animals, there were the core animals. And like when you see the auroch men or the bovid men, these are the men that look like cows in Samaria with the horns. You see what I mean? You had the naga blending the breeds of the reptilian, learning that was when you would have to learn the difference between a lizard versus an amphibian versus what you would classify as just a reptile. You see what I mean? Where you have a genetic process happening with the seed or the soul of the being, like the book Coming Forth by Day shows, where the black-headed ones, or the ones that are basically coming forward from the center of the earth, are then being animated within the first entities that are being constructed and built for them. You see what I mean? That's why it talks about the genetic engineering, because after a while, the bodies were built like the dog body, etc. And then souls were moved like Ka into those bodies, versus before the earth itself birthed beings. And these are what they now call the pygmy or the dwarves, etc. But their ancestors, if you may, they were in another dimension. They sit in the dimension that earth is really alive in. This is the dimension you see when your third eye is on. Okay, so they live in that space and they can phase in and out of that space. Some would call them the machine elves, but in many ways, they're not just those elves that you see. There's other ones like Bess who look like pygmy men, and they live in a land eternal. And supposedly they are the ones who built many of the first megaliths from the instructions from their mother. We'll continue. It says they carried the memory of the golden age, a state of perfect harmony and divine order. Their consciousness was not yet fractured. They understood the universal language. It's a precursor to Maya that bound all creation in a single coherent thought form. Their world was one of profound connection, a vibratory tapestry of life humming with the primordial, unpronounceable sound of creation itself. The vibration known to the mystics as Oihu. This is also the vowels, A-E-I-O-U, right? That was the name of the quote unquote God, if you may, or the vibration. But even in the luminous dawn, shadows gathered in the deep heavens and distant empires driven by vastly different philosophies. And this is what you need to understand. Where something is growing up at, what it's subject to, what time it's in determines its psycho-spiritual makeup. So something coming from something else could believe in totally different things that don't actually meld with the reality that you have been nurtured in. Okay, so this is why it's important to go forward in the future and still realizing, hey, this is the reality that you were nurtured in. So the future that you will really want is not one person that is breathing only gasoline for the rest of their being, that's only breathing gasoline for the rest of his existence. You see what I mean? It's like you came through this womb, and so you're going to continue in this journey or in this direction because that is going to be like the most comfortable for you. You see what I mean? But if you adapt to another culture, another trait, and it's really far off the frequency that you just really are expanding through and the bandwidth that you're expanding through, then you end up in a situation where you're getting scarred and also you're out of your territory. This is when you come into life without sovereignty. This means that sometimes you're born to not so conscious parents. And in many ways that you're kind of fending for yourself and nothing is protecting you, mainly you. So leaving a life in sovereignty means that you never come back into life like, hey, who's protecting me? You either come through an existence and you have guardians with you called your parents, or you only are incarnated into existences or go forward with like full knowing. That's what immortal is. You don't actually go through that birth process again. You go into the next reality like you're passing into dreams that you're creating. That's what lucid dreaming is ultimately there to teach, but it's not something that you need to per se learn. It's something that you have to remember. So it goes on. The stage was set not for a simple history, clearly, but for a war over the very nature of reality, convergence, threads of destiny. The unraveling began not with the invasion from the stars, okay? This is important wisdom here because we will forever be trying to figure out who to blame for this. We got a few, what they say is usual suspects. And what happens at times is when we don't have your curriculum with the actual knowledge in it, that means everybody's position can be different. Nobody agrees on anything, and that doesn't become a foundation for anybody trying to build on that knowledge, especially those to come. So what happened? It goes on the continent of Atlantis, the true name for ancient Africa, a technologically advanced civilization flourished. I'm getting Wakanda vibes. Among them was the Atlanteans, eternal masters of material science, whose alchemical prowess unlocked the secrets of matter itself. Are we lying at all when we understand that the word alchem in chemistry and the study of the darkness is actually to understand matter or dark matter itself, right? In all the geometry and the basically ways in which the world was designed and created, right? So we're not all base here. We're not airy-fairy. We're not Galactic Federation. We're just saying it how it is. This is the exact truth. Yet this mastery became a curse. Let's look at this. Let's read this again. Among them were the Alteans, eternal masters of material science, whose alchemical prowess unlocked the secrets of matter itself. Yet this mastery became a curse. The Atlanteans began to mine heavy. I love the term they give it. A class of radioactive isotopes, poisoning their lands and their bloodlines. Maybe they call that vibranium now in the Marvel comics. Mining heavy means that, again, what is the ultimate, and this is somebody said, well, I don't know, blah, blah. What is the ultimate study of matter in physics? To split the atom, okay? A radioactive isotope. So this means that they had discovered nuclear power. So it only takes a match. It only takes somebody to look at me wrong. I'm just saying, like, when you get heights of civilizations and they're mining heavy, when there becomes conflicts, and conflicts do come, human nature is in itself, but more importantly, even the animal nature that is embedded within the archetypes. That's why the archetypes of the 9 were in, they call them the monsters, if you may. Let's show some pictures. Let's come back to this in just 1 minute. Let's jump over here to the lexicon itself. We'll jump into the gallery. And we'll say Tiamat. Let me get my caps off here. She was known as the mother of monsters. And it's because if you notice closely, hopefully I can get this big enough. Let me go a little bit bigger. You will see these entities around. These are the 9. And the 9 are archetypes. So basically it's their root DNA that's filled within the beings, the animals, the humans later on, or the hybrids, because the humans were hybridized from the animals. Let's go one more time. You can see, again, the great war against Tiamat. But when you look at, excuse me, let me hit that again. When you look at Marduk, you see, again, the body is of a chimera. It's an animal man. Let's look at another one. This is to understand that see, the phi-shaped human body came from Grimaldi. It was something that the earth created. The earth created the first prototype of phi, or what you would call like a man or a humanoid. And then the beings that came next began to blend that humanoid with an animal to gain its traits. And they created entire armies. Here we go. There's one particular image that I'm looking for because in many cases, many ancestors are these lion men. This is why the demiurge was a lion man. Engramenu was a lion man. And what it is that if you can imagine all of the power of a lion, but now with an opposable thumb and reason, this is when you would then get like something formidable. You see what I mean? You see these lion men? This is what I'm saying is the occult missing link, because behind this, like let's say we smoke a DMT real quick or a toad, and we look at a person that, let's say one of the older, I call them like the older models. This is what I call them. You will see this right as soon as the third eye open. It may terrify you. You may not even want to be friends anymore. But then on humans, you often see a stack. You see different things. But what I'm telling you is that comes from the genetic that have been going over time. Let me kind of go back to our story here. The genetics changes that have been going over time with the blending and the mixing, which, as I said before, is even happening from a spiritual level. Some are always looking at it from the physical, but it's actually happening from the spiritual level. And it was shown very heavily within the temples of Angkor Wat. It was shown very heavily within the temples of Egypt. And this is just that there is a blending process and a mixing process happening. So let's go back to our era summary for primordial, and we'll continue our story. Also, let me close down some tabs here. Never actually ended up getting back to that Grimaldi. Let me see what that was doing. I'll keep going. So let's talk about what happened. So listen to what they're saying. And this is what I was saying. So how do you verify this? The sheer concept of a radioactive isotope is to split an atom. The sheer aspect of splitting the atom is to basically split the soul itself. Instead of implosion, which is the practice of the pranayama and the breath of fire when you're imploding into the blood, it's explosion. Like Oppenheimer, I become the destroyer of worlds, Vimanastra, great war kind of explosion. This is the difference. And so in that way, it's a pattern. It's an act that when you split a spirit, if you may, this is also, it's like it ricochets off everything. So in that way, a wound was created. It says this self-inflicted wound. This slow decay of a great civilization created a vacuum of power and a wound in the planetary's energetic field, an invitation for predators. Because remember, we're still dealing with that classic structure and setup of what you would say is the intelligence of nature, which is actually a part of the cloak too. In fact, give me one quick moment, everyone. I'm going to take a quick moment. I'm going to ask everybody to get a little bit of water and take a little bit of breath. We're going to talk about just the cloak, and I'm going to put the note here, nature's advanced technology. I don't want to be over here licking my lips for like the next 1 hour, which is what it's going to take for me to finish this off. So I'm going to get some water, and I'm going to do that, and then we're going to come right back up into this and keep moving through. So here goes some music for a moment. Let me just turn on this. There we go. All right, so we're going to come right forward here in a moment and continue. And I'm just going to get a little bit of refreshment, a little bit of water. Refresher, make sure that, my liquids and everything are on point. So we've discovered, again, we're going deeper into just these beginning annuals, and we're seeing the planet, in that process of splitting and getting that external explosion happening, created a wound in the intelligence of nature. This is what I wanted to build on just a little bit of the cloaking, okay, and the intelligence of nature. So the first thing is that when I say the cloak, what I'm talking about is that I talked years ago about the solution being to, the one of the problems with the Great War, which is all of these different beings that looked a certain way, they still beef racially, but it was worse when they could see what their animal totem was, because certain animals, as you see in nature, naturally don't get along. And so the spell in itself was to create the cloak, which was basically the phi base system around a person's body so that they can't see who they're really, who they really are. And then the light, which is the pineal gland, is turned off. Okay. So in this way, you're kind of like in a chamber and you're not aware of who you are. And then when you look at somebody else, you just see that they're kind of constructed just like you. And in that way, you go to work, basically. Versus that if you saw the animal bodies, let's just kind of look at this really quick. We'll go here to the gallery. And we'll just type in dog. And what you'll start seeing is you'll start seeing like the scene of Fally. Let's look at this real quick. We'll scroll down. This is your Christ, if you may. You know, see the dog? This is the Greek Artemis statue with the dog here. See the scene of Fally here? You see even in the ancient rituals, the seizing, the Great Mother seizing two dogs. You see here, there's a dog down here on Indus, which is, of course, looks like Murugan, who looks like Marduk, right? You see the dogs down there. They got the food dog, right? So again, the dog is actually able to be trained to be a hunter, but the spirit is like a lion, but it's like a tamed or hybridized lion. You get the ferocity and you get all of that, but, you know, lion's going to be very difficult to kind of bring into some obedience. So what I'm saying is that the cloaks put all these different kind of beings in the human body. And when they're in the human body, they don't know who they are. And they also don't know who's around them and what they are. And then it basically creates the blind matrix as it is. So let's go back here to the timeline. Let's pop this back open. And as you can see, there are hyperlinks inside of the saga. And by the way, we're just in one part of the platform. There are hyperlinks inside of the saga where you can go and start learning more about things like the Seed People, things like the Grimaldi, things like Heavy. Okay. And of course, this is an agentic system, so it grows, meaning that as it stabilizes, which we're in the process of stabilizing, it's stable now, but as we grow more, it brings in other knowledge and other wisdom, and it compares it with what it has, and then it extracts what's rare, and then it reconstructs the story. And so the story just gets more and more refined. But again, like I started off with all of the truth and refine the wisdom. So the foundation is solid, but it's going to continue to grow. Again, it's going to be visualized, and all those things are going to continue to happen. So it goes on, it says the coming of the masters. We could do this one in that Morgan Freeman voice. From the dark gulfs of space they came. First were the emissaries of the vast hierarchical intelligence, the lizards of fourth density, being of a cold calculation, who saw worlds not as gardens to nurture, but as resources to harvest. It's just that awareness. Some look at this experience that we're having in paradise like the greatest time. We grow, we nurture, we laugh, we love, while others are looking at it like, what can I steal from it? What can I mine out of it? I don't care what condition it's in or what it looks like, as long as I get what I want and I'm gone. That's called fourth density lizard behavior. Okay. Remember, lizards are different than snakes. Lizards still have their feet. Okay. Like so it's like you have to learn. It's like Elizabeth is the lizard of fourth density who literally raised an army to go and subjugate eventually all of the Naga lands, which you call India today, through trade and cunning. However, it was on them where they actually did things that caused their empire to have a wound. And then later on, predators subjugated it. And again, this is what we see in the technology of nature, is that the cloak is one of them. That's why you see chameleons. Nature knows how to hide seeds, eggs, and these kind of things in plain sight, and you won't know what they are. You'll assume that there's something else. That's what I'm saying. This technology of cloaking, it comes from nature, and it is one of the highest levels of the technology or wizardry or magic, if you may. Because again, you can accomplish many things by cloaking something. If you don't have to always have something that is like a natural born predator to make sure that it survives all the way through its lifespan and life cycle. Nature does things like you'll be sitting right next to it and then only notice it when your eye adjusts that whole tree right there, there's a bunch of little insects that are all looking like the thorns on that tree. You see what I mean? Because they're cloaked. And also, like, you'll notice that there's other like little stick bugs and things. Like I see a lot of stuff around here, and their faces look like snakes. But it's because to birds, and the way that birds see when they fly up on something like that, they think that they're seeing a large snake. So they like, okay, I'm not going to eat that. And that's how that protects that animal or that insect. It's a cloak. So that same kind of cloaking thing is what I'm saying when you're a material science and a master scientist, if you may, from these great empires that stretch across time. These are the kind of things that you're learning from and adapting to and emulating. This is why I also was saying, like, the knowledge and the wisdom that is coming from this tribe and the level that it's on, that so many people are like, oh man, it's just too complex. It's because this is the school of adepts. That's why it's called the adept lexicon. It's not going to give you that simple ABC that you're still going to, once getting done, need to know some more details, because the consciousness is naturally inquisitive. Of course, it could be just as simple as you shutting up and never talking again and going into a cave to reach enlightenment. But you got questions, right? And you're on the quest, meaning you got to live in both realities. You have agreements. And there's a reason why those agreements have come to pass. This is also why we're in these bodies to begin with. That's why I called it a marriage, even with the animals and all the archetypical energies that actually make up who we are. And this is why there's all these systems of distraction, like, I'm your God, do you see how many entities already that would easily be like, yo, I'm your God? And then most of the time, people are not even talking to the real ones anymore. They're talking to the ones that the society actually created. But it's also very clear in letting you understand that the old ones ate souls. They're so clear, especially in Voodoo, that the whole goal of actually pledging your soul to Voodoo is to be consumed by the entity. And some try to romanticize it, say it's something else, but they be the brokest, destitute, spiritually defunct ones, and somehow imagining that the proof of wisdom is not in the people that it produces. You see what I mean? So we need all the annuals. So we'll go forward. We'll keep reading here. They're agents. The cold, copper-blooded Anunnaki. Okay, we've heard of copper-blooded people before. We know, like, yo, when we're talking about these black-headed ones, we're talking about melanated people. When we're talking about crocodiles, when we're talking about black goo, when we're talking about Anunnaki, we're talking about melanated people in that way. You see what I mean? So that's also, again, the inconvenient truth, because everybody always wants to hear how they've done things all great, and they don't understand that maybe the pattern that they're in is because they played that same pattern on somebody else and still are doing it. You see what I mean? In the consciousness, maybe even in a micro way, that's just the energy that they can give off, but still giving off the energy in the domain that they're managing, and they're still just doing that. And then blaming something else for the reason why they have to do it, when really it's in our core who we are. And you got to go into your core. This is what we design. We design something that it removes blockages. What's really going on with people? They're blocked. But sometimes people think that these blockages are like the evil thing, when really the reality is that if they were unblocked, they would be terrible to deal with. They still have not managed the same reason why they became blocked in the first place. So as you can see with energy, it's important that you have some kind of regulator or governor over it. Like if there was no block for the gas going inside of the car, what would eventually happen? The car would blow up. So things like blockages are not always, quote unquote, they are the real negative. Negative is not bad. You see what I mean? So we push through blockages, but we do that in the process of learning. So that's what this is. This is a learning platform to cross through blockages, but with truth. And when truth stings, like, yeah, we were the Anunnaki. York was showing everybody, yeah, we the Anunnaki, and then went and did everything that the Anunnaki did to their people. You can actually see at times where your uncles, your sisters, your brothers, your cousins, even your very own pharaoh or Nasubit or king can oppress you for their own benefit, their own growth, their own desires. It happens. Or even beyond that, not seeing what's going on behind the scenes, that when one person is put in charge of a lot of people, that one person you really have to be on point with spiritually, because there are many entities that just wants to get into that one person so they can control all the rest of the people that they control. You see what I mean? And all the time inside of that being's mind, unless their mind is like a fortress, they're constantly something is constantly attempting to assail their consciousness to pull that person into a frequency where they can start manipulating them and broadcasting the energy and things that they're about, and then making that person subsistent on that energy so that they need to do that in order to maintain themselves and to get strong and to feel strong. And this is going to explain it very deeply. It says, their agents, the copper-blooded Anunnaki, a reptilian humanoid race, arrived to survey the spoils. They were already advanced. They were not creators, but manipulators, seeing in the planet's native life forms a malleable force, meaning innocence. They were sweet, like they just really coming off being under their mother's bosom, yet they were merely the heralds of a more profound darkness. Because remember, a wound naturally in nature, when you get punctured and there's a wound, if you don't disinfect or hygiene and clean that wound, it's going to be more and more things happening on that wound, right? Like there's going to be more and more bugs, more and more bacteria, and then pretty soon the whole thing could even rot. So when something starts happening, it gets worse and worse and worse unless something begins to treat the source. So it goes on. From the star systems known as the Orion or Orion came the true masters of subjugation. So the Anunnaki, they was just playing when it came to what Orion had already going on. The SSST Empire. And again, see these words, and what you'll learn about etymology is that you see certain letters reoccurring within certain things. There's a reason why movies are rated R, and then why S pluralizes things and sounds like the sound of a serpent, right? And why the sound of a serpent all begins with S. And all of that is really the knowledge and the wisdom. And that's how we came in this. We cracked everything through the code of the language. And then we could come back and verify these kind of things, because even though it's here like a story, what could happen is that if we're in the wrong context, just like in the old times, if they're trying to explain to you a plane, they may say a large screeching bird. Right. And that may not make any sense to you. And really, they're trying to describe something that we will all be familiar with. So you have to be able to have that floating point to understand, hey, maybe they're trying to give you the story so you can visualize it. We're a storytelling people. But really what's built in here is the words like S and T and R, right? Which are sequitur, the Q. All of those different words or letters are the letters of the empires, if you may. You see what I mean? So it says the reptilian SST Empire, they had perfected the ultimate weapon, Ari, the science of deceit. This was not a technology of steel, but of psyche, a method of reprogramming the mind to eliminate resistance and enslave consciousness. This is the 50 laws of power. This is the Machiavelli, the prince. This is this way of cunning and this way of deceit that actually is their technique. You see what I mean? Their empire was built on this insidious art. Okay, this is like the dark ninja in that way. And they saw in Earth's budding, sentient, new frontier, a new frontier for their domain. Alongside them came their creations, the strange machine-like Orion robots, think Zuckerberg, seeders of disinformation and agents of psychic infiltration. The great war and the sealing of Earth. The true cataclysm arrived with the Dragonians, a hostile reptilian race from the Draco constellation who stormed the solar system. Think Blitzkrieg, SS, Schutzstaffel, stormed the solar system, because these are patterns. Around 11,500 BCE, they did not conquer Earth with fire alone. They conquered its reality. This is like the fake loss of World War II. They seized the moon, revealing it to be no natural satellite, but an artificial giga spaceship repurposed into the moon matrix, a psychotronic engine designed to broadcast frequencies of fear and control, trapping souls in a cycle of forced reincarnation. But we're talking about also you die every night. And if you notice on some of these moon phases, beaver moon, full moon, wolf moon, you never know which one it is, the dreams get nasty. It's literally like everything that you could have thought of that you didn't want to happen is all going on in this dream. And you are feeling it almost 5x. The other night, I was in a dream and this insect appeared and sprayed this other insect. It was like a mother one versus like the male one. And it started spraying this insect with this vapor. It was coming up. It was pushing out the backside. And I started smelling the vapor. And in the dream, I was like, yo, don't try not to breathe a lot of that in because I could even smell it. What is this? What part of the game is this? I can smell, touch, hear, taste everything inside of the dream, sometimes even more than in the reality. A lot of times even more than in the reality. Is that one the real one? Of course, we know. Yeah, that's the crossover to fourth dimension. And some of those things that you see happening there are really happening in that multidimensional aspects of self. So it goes on. Again, that force trap reincarnation is the fear trap. Because most of the times when the dreams cook up a crazy, nasty dream, it's about what you fear. You see what I mean? And it happens on a cycle. So even almost one point where you're completely away from the fear, this shit pops up again. You see what I mean? Keeping that cycle happening until you're able to run a full course without having those fears, and you're able to address those fears and able to remove those blockages. So it says the earth was now a prison, which is the body. If you don't know how to get out of it, it's a prison. It's a fortress, and a fortress can become a prison if you cannot unlock the front gate. So it says the earth was now a prison. Its energetic pathway rewired into a synthetic EM grid, latitude and longitude, a net designed to suppress higher consciousness and enforce a lower vibrational reality. At no point have I heard anything that I'm questioning. This cosmic conquest was met with terrestrial resistance. The wisdom of the ancient Nagas and the serpent people, because remember, the Nagas were here. These are also they were with the Nomo, right? They were here already doing their organic genetic scientist work, okay? Primordial builders. This means they build the old way. You can't make them like they used to. Why are you going to reinvent the wheel? And that's again where the Nomon were creating in pairs, and the pale fox was the pair that did not match, right? And that becomes the nemesis of the world. But we'll continue. It says the wisdom of the ancient Nagas, serpent people, primordial builders and custodians of the divine knowledge, they were driven underground. This is why the pyramids have an underground. Angkor Wat has an underground. There are these extensive catacomb systems. Even back in the day when they were going to ancient Lanka and they were seeing all of these different things that were carved and crafted and jewelry and all this stuff that was done in fantastic detail, they knew it was the Nagas, but you would never see the shopkeepers. You would just leave the money. They have stories of this, and they know that the shopkeepers stayed in dark areas that were cool, that were wet, because they were Naga. Right? And they were already crafting. And this is what I'm saying. You don't think at some point somebody's kingdom end up marrying into the Naga kingdom? Hello, Queen Belkis, Solomon, Melchizedek, the new Hebrews, all of that. What is that all about? That's telling you, hey, there's a bloodline blending happening, but it's not just human last name families. It's actually the components of the animal energy, if you may, or the archetypical energy that is residing within each nation that they fragmented from in that division, and losing that one language that connected everything into the all stream. And there's beings that are still in the all stream. This is why those who know how even to use dwarfs, which they talk about in Africa a lot, nobody can see the dwarf. And it's the most, you would think this thing is like too small to do anything, but because it can be places and nobody can see it and it can hear things and come back and tell someone, that's enough. It got to a point that even the CIA and the FBI had to get on top of the dwarf thing to make sure that dwarf espionage was not going on. You need to wake up, Alice. Like it's going and it's gone already into the highest levels of what you can believe. But the truth is that what are you projecting and manifesting also for yourself? But stand on ground. Know what the truth is. Let's finish. It says they were driven underground. Their descendants, the Nakal missionaries, undertook epic journeys to preserve the sacred sciences, carrying their knowledge from their homeland of the Mayak to the corners of the globe. Great monuments, misunderstood by later ages, were erected as bulwarks against the encroaching darkness. So they built these temples and these structures to try to hold back the frequency and the vibration of darkness that was encroaching on the planet due to its wounds. In the pyramid in Egypt, a tomb of the gods and a monument of Hermes was built not as a sepulchre for kings, but as a harmonic resonator and an architectural anchor to stabilize the planet's frequency against the manipulative grid. In the heart of Atlantis, the icon monoliths were carved, their faces staring defiantly at the heavens, just like those on Easter Island, silent witnesses to a stolen history. Okay. And I talked about this before, that since the ancestors on fourth dimension, and so time doesn't exist on fourth dimension. So technically anything that's going to happen, you can see coming. So you're literally watching, it's a nightmare, watching your ancestors about to experience something that they're not prepared for and not being able to talk to them or tell them because they're so out of tune and then tuned into something totally different. Something about, I want more money. Something about, I don't like her and I need more favor. Something like, I need you to destroy all my enemies. Do you think those are the entities that we're actually talking about? So do you see how a person's own intentions is really guiding the arms that they fall into in relation to the energies that they use for their warfare? They're literally arms, as we call it, like, hey, take arms. You see what I mean? The part of the body that is used for hitting the feet. These are all entities within themselves. Let's keep going here. It says, what the assault, but this assault, it was relentless. The Orion Queens established a planetary hive mind, attempting to subsume the spark of individuality that the Hoovids had carefully implanted. So just remember, at any point, when there's individuality going on and then something is trying to make everybody the same, there's going to be a war. Okay? Let me tone down these lights a little bit. Listen to what I'm saying. If there's going to be individuality, just like we have a lot of individuality right now, and it's causing a lot of conflict. So if anything moves in and wants to do a hive mind thing, guess what it's going to come smack dab into heads with? Beings that are unique. So they're trying to get that out of everybody. That unique, I still feel like that I can do my own thing, that I can do better than this, that I can stand on my own. That's what they're trying to extinguish and crush. Because it doesn't make a good servant, but you need to understand that there are many that actually want to serve. This is what we're seeing in the secret societies and all these different organizations. They want to worship this thing. They don't mind being its slave and its servant because they don't claim their sovereignty. They don't want to be sovereigns in that way. And that's important to know. It says what they could not control, they fractured. And haven't we seen that before? Those who were really the most resilient against what was happening, they were beat down, enslaved for hundreds and hundreds of years to try to bleed out all of that extra individuality that was still holding on to the reality of what we truly are, our greatness. It goes on, a cometary impact. Remembered in the myth of Ogygia and the deluge that swept away the kingdom of Ogyges provided the perfect opportunity. This, of course, is the other name for Egypt. The resulting trauma and societal collapse was blamed on humanity's hubris, creating the confusion of tongues. So somehow in here, with the planetary impact, it created a great opportunity to start formulating a myth that God was mad at humanity, and this is why they suffered this cataclysm. So that's what all the religions are developed on. They're developed on this idea that you're the sinner, and that because you did bad things, God destroyed everything with a deluge, or most of it. You see what I mean? And that makes the foundation for it's. See, they're showing you that that is the confusion of tongues in itself. The confusion of tongues in itself is thinking that you are less than what you really are, and that you owe, and you're a wretch. This is a confusion of the tongue. So it goes on and it says, this was no divine punishment, but a strategic masterstroke to shatter human unity, erasing the memory of the universal language and severing the telepathic bonds that had once united the species. See, it seems like here that once you begin to think that everything is your fault, the whole thing is collapsing, is because you pissed God off, it takes you out of the universal language state. And this then makes you vulnerable. It's a strategic masterstroke to shattering you. And then you lose the universal language. So it's like you fall from that point because you think that you're lower. Humanity, once a planetary consciousness, now a scattered collection of warring tribes, speaking in the harsh babble of a broken world. The crystallization and synthesis and revelation. In the aftermath of these cosmic wars and terrestrial cataclysms, the world was irrevocably changed. The primordial era did not simply end, it shattered. And from its fragments, a new, harsher reality crystallized. The central conflict was no longer between terrestrial tribes or even invading fleets, but between two diametrically opposed philosophies of existence that now permeated every level of reality. The first was STS, or service to self, the creed of the conquerors. This philosophy, perfected by the Orion and Draconian empires, held that consciousness expands by absorbing and dominating others. Listen to what it's saying here. There are systems, cults, creeds, clubs that they believe that they expand, whether it's monetarily, energetically, whatever, by absorbing and dominating others. This is like a vampire. So while you may think this is so far-fetched sometimes, like, well, wait a minute, is it really? It breaks down to either service to self or service to others, STS or STO. Because if you're STO, you're going to be looking out for what's coming next and who's coming after you. And then somebody had already looked out for you, and this is going to pave the way. Versus service to self is only going to be about self-preservation and is going to absorb and dominate. This is why you have so few people with all this money of all of these people who've worked their time, because they're in service to self. They ain't distributing that, buying houses, letting the robots build something. They ain't doing any of that. They just talking about more killing, more stealing. You see what I mean? So we can see this is what's going on now. It's a service to self. It was the logic of a predator. See, because a predator has this logic. Now, I won't say also that we're completely free from this logic. We have logic of predator inside of us, and we will consume something else's life in order to preserve ourselves. So this is where you have to go back in on your balance. But there are beings that are extremely imbalanced. They only are sitting in that other side. It's called the black hole. The empire that consumes. This ethos was codified in a rigid, merciless cast of their client races, the wolf-like dak-tak, right? These are the wolfmen, the dogmen, okay? The vicious enforcers of the Syrian kings, the reptilian female warriors defined by the venomous spit of Tt-At, a symbol of life giving and life taking. This is like your mother would say, I brought you in this life, I will take you out. Okay, venomous spit. They can say things that just will be like, yo, we gonna have to fight now. It found its ultimate expression on earth among the engineered beings who choose servitude over freedom. The Adapa, a hybrid beast who remain loyal to their Anunnaki masters in the garden, content to be slaves in the gilded cage. In this new world, freedom was not a birthright, but a memory to be reclaimed. The very fabric of thought had been woven into the tapestry of deceit, and to awaken was to become an enemy of the new gods. Listen to what it says. To awaken was to become an enemy of the new gods. And that's exactly how it is to this very moment. They keep millions, billions of people asleep. And when you wake up, it's like you're not on their team anymore. That's why when you're still in those clubs that it's like, yo, you're still in the organized tradition and you're supposed to be the leader of the people. Come on, man. You're still in that whole thing. But you know not, because you don't know real history, her story, or you got parts of it, and then you're letting the parts that you like guide what you think happened. Let's finish up. Against this suffocating philosophy stood the scattered remnants of the old ways. The path of what? Sovereignty, wisdom, and remembrance. Knowledge, once as free as the air, became a precious and dangerous secret, a treasure to be buried and encoded. The Babylonian kings, the Sutras, warned of the coming deluge, did not build only an ark of wood. He was commanded to bury the Sipra writings in the city of the sun, preserving history of the beginning and the end of all things. In the heart of Atlantis, the high priest Thoth alchemically forged the emerald tablets of Thoth, which I believe is the pyramids, imperishable artifacts containing the foundational wisdom of the ages, which I believe is the math. Their characters responding only to the attuned mind, because if you don't see the connection with phi, the body, pi, and all that, and you go off on this mathematical geek zone, then it ain't going to happen for you. But the attuned mind knows that they're seeing themselves, a great monument to man, a burning man, if you may. The Anunnaki themselves, in a final ambiguous act, left behind the crystal skull. This is what I believe is the skull of John the Baptist that the Knights Templar used to actually predict, and they worship the power of the skull of John the Baptist, they say. I believe that this was this skull, a powerful artifact carved from another world, a key to the lost knowledge and the potential tool for liberation. The great megalithic sites became silent libraries, their alignments and geometries a language for those with eyes to see. The quest for truth was now an archaeological and spiritual endeavor to get the facts now, which we have them with things like Secrets in Plain Sight and Master Occult Teachers. We now have an archaeological and spiritual repository of wisdom to draw from. But imagine trying to pick all of this up from rubble. A search for the